Get your hippity hoppity, my son deserves your property and other merch today. Defend your property from entitled parents. If justice was a cookie, it would taste like ProRevenge, and I guess PettyRevenge might be the chocolate chips. And that's what we have for you today, a Justice chocolate chip cookie. This child should win an Oscar for his amazing acting performance. You'll be blown away at the clever revenge he plans against a neighbor to try to keep his grandmother safe. When an office co-worker sneaks behind his back and makes him work overtime, this man decides that she must pay, but only a little and in the most petty way possible. And our fan-submitted story. This frustrated son goes years being mistreated by his dad, who only thinks about himself, until one day he discovers a powerful word that puts a stop to it. What is the most powerful word you can use against an entitled person? I'm sure you Voicey veterans already have a clue. You'll find out by watching this episode of VoiceyHere's ProRevenge, featuring PettyRevenge. This story was called Guy Speeds Out of His Driveway Every Day Without Looking. I think I may have messed him up mentally forever. Small piece of background info. As a kid, I was always playing rough, and at some point even thought about becoming a stuntman. Actually, that still sounds like an awesome career. So me and my friends did the whole fake fighting thing, and I learned how to easily take hits and pretty nasty falls without getting hurt badly. I was one of those kids that always had cuts and bruises, and no idea how I got them. Nor did I care. I also have always had the superpower to cause myself a bloody nose just by picking a very specific spot. This may not sound like a superpower, but if you didn't study for a test, it was a God's gift to be able to just walk out of the classroom with a bloody nose, knowing you could retake it at another time. This story happened a couple of years ago, and it may be the worst thing I ever did. I was 17 years old, and being a Dutch, I rode my bike everywhere. I lived pretty close to my grandparents and would bike past their house on a daily basis. Their house was at the corner of a Y-shaped intersection, and there was a guy who lived on the same intersection who was the worst driver I have ever met. He would just not look when driving out of his garage and just speed into the road. He had nearly hit me twice already, and every time he just cursed at me to get out of his way. Now you have to believe me when I say this, but I am not a vengeful person. But something about this just annoyed me so much. My grandma also loves to ride her bike around town to do the groceries, and I knew I had to do something before my grandma would get hit. I asked my grandma about the man, and she told me what I already knew. The guy was an absolute jerk, and everyone did everything wrong except for him. I told my grandma what I was planning, and if she would help me. She eventually agreed, and together we made a plan to teach him a lesson he would never forget. I decided to hang out around the guy's house for a couple of weeks to take notes of when he left for work every day and how fast he was going. I worked everything out to the smallest detail. No room for errors on this one. I started practicing my falls again and looked up some tutorials to prepare myself for the performance of a lifetime. One sunny Monday morning, I get up and started stretching and warming up my muscles. Today is the day. I grab my bike and drive it just around the corner of the guy's garage. I mentally prepare myself and start my bloody nose with ease, making sure to get nice and bloody in the process. Then I hear it. The garage door opens. I now have 3.7 seconds before he would be racing out of his garage. Like I said, every detail, no room for error. I start driving my bike as fast as I could and get ready for the impact. And let me tell you, it went beautifully. I was no longer sitting on my seat and had my left hand already off my handlebar to help with the impact of the car. I rolled over the hood and windshield of his car and landed in a nice rolling motion as I taught myself all those years ago. I ended up hitting the ground on the passenger side of the car. All in all, the whole accident took less than a second. But I still remember it as if it happened in slow motion. The guy was freaking out as he thought he just killed a guy. And if you were just looking at the amount of blood on his car, it wasn't that much, but on a white car, every drop stands out. You would agree. As I laid there next to his car, he came screaming out asking if I was okay. Of course I pretended I wasn't and took my sweet time trying to get up. It was at this point that my grandma came running out of her house right on cue, screaming, "My baby, you hit my grandson!" The guy didn't know what to do. He was so full of shock that I thought he may pass out. I'll give him credit, he kept his cool and knew he was in the wrong. He called me an ambulance and stayed by my side. When they arrived, they checked me out. I was fine. A couple of bruises and a small scratch on my knee from hitting the pavement. They bandaged me up and left. My grandma brought me to her car and brought me home. A couple of days later, I ride my bike past the guy's house again and notice a piece of paper on one of the car's windows. For sale, call 06, etc. I ask my grandma what happened, and word on the street is that the accident left him traumatized and now he refuses to drive anymore, taking public transit everywhere and selling his car. My grandma is happy that she can ride her bike without having to worry, and I am happy that I don't have to worry for her life. We talked about it afterwards and both of us agree that although what we did was a horrible thing to do to someone, it had to be done before somebody would actually get hurt, and we don't feel any remorse about it. Now this is the definition of pro-revenge. Using your superpower to be able to make your nose bleed upon will. Thank goodness this guy is using his powers for good. Can you imagine if he developed into like a supervillain? He would be a con man suing people left, right and center. I'm a bit conflicted with this story because as they recognize, it was a pretty horrible thing to do, but if he was traumatized over that, imagine how he would have felt if he actually killed somebody. So in the end, maybe he ended up with not such a bad result, seeing as the person he harmed wasn't really harmed at all. This story was called, "You Really Want That Mini Fridge?" I work in an office where we have a small budget set aside for random purchases. It's basically like a petty cash account that we can use for expenses related to our projects and productivity. There are 5 of us who share that account. My team is also on the second floor, where there happens to be a full kitchen. Fridge, oven, dishwasher, popcorn machine, 4 coffee makers, etc. right next door. I was given an assignment that involves using a creative mathematical technique. I could build a script for it and spend hours upon hours on it, or I could just get an add-on for the software I currently use and get it done in about 5 minutes. The add-on costs about $200. I was talking to one of my co-workers and told her that I was about to go and ask the boss to buy me the software add-on with the petty cash account. No biggie. He'd do it no problem. Then my co-worker started telling me that she was upset people were stealing her coffee creamer from the kitchen. So she was going to ask the boss to buy her a mini fridge for her desk. That fridge also cost about $200. I didn't think much of it, then left to go to lunch. When I came back, I went to my boss's office and asked him if I could use some of the petty cash funds. He said no because they had just been exhausted and I would have to wait 2 weeks. I explained how I needed the add-on to do my job more efficiently, but he told me, "Sorry, we don't have any money until the 15th. I'm sure you can figure something out." My project was due before then, so I was going to have to make the script. Crap. It took me hours to build a script to do this, because I've never done it before. I had to come in twice overnight as well. I'm salary, so I don't get paid more for coming in extra hours. Sure enough, a few days later, while I was sweating over the script, in walks a delivery man with my co-worker's new mini fridge. I learned through the grapevine that my co-worker knew the petty cash funds were low, so purposefully tried to beat me to the punch. Okay, you want to play this game? I started unplugging her fridge a few months ago. Not every day, but occasionally. I'll unplug it and let it sit for a few days, then sneak back there and plug it back in right before she gets to the office. Every time I do this, everything in that fridge, including her precious creamer, goes bad. She has to clean out the fridge with disinfectant constantly, and sometimes her cubicle smells vaguely of sour milk. The fridge has been exchanged 4 times because it's broken. Every time she's asked to exchange the fridge, my boss has to deal with it because he's the one in charge of the account that made the purchase. He's not happy about it. Yesterday, after the cheese and broccoli incident, they removed her mini fridge permanently from the office. My boss also sent out a memo this morning that says we aren't allowed to make any appliance purchases with the petty cash funds from this point forward, and included a reminder that a full kitchen is right next door. I wonder why he would say that. Sometimes the ProRevenge that are the really subtle things are the ones that are actually the most effective. If you were that lady, you would just be going mad. Like, what is wrong? Why am I cursed? Why do I have some sort of fridge curse? And you'd be getting in trouble with the boss with something that's completely out of your control. Like, I don't know why these fridges keep breaking. It's so simple, yet so genius. This story was called Apartment Complex Pulled a Fast One on Me. I commandeered some of their income. This happened quite a few years ago. I decided to move from Texas to the Midwest in April to be closer to my father, who had prostate cancer. The previous October, I came up to visit and go apartment hunting. I found a complex I liked in a decent location. They wouldn't let me reserve an apartment 6 months in advance, so I had to wait 4 months before filing out an application, providing proof of income, etc., etc., and choosing an apartment from 1,100 miles away. Sight unseen is no easy task. Lots of phone calls, lots of faxing, lots of trying to decipher floor plans. But I decided on a 2-bed, 2-bath, 1,125 square foot unit for $890, which seemed like an unusually good price. So April finally arrives, and I arrive at the leasing office with my U-Haul packed to the brim. I go in to get my keys, and amongst other things, the woman explains the washer-dryer situation to me. There's a laundry room on every floor, each with 2 washers and 2 dryers. The machines don't take coins, they take toquettes, which are wafer-thin, shield-shaped plastic tokens. Each wash and each dry is 1 toquette. Toquettes are $1 each. They're sold only in packs of 10. They must be purchased from the leasing office during business hours. And the only payment accepted is check. What if I don't want 10? I keep odd hours, so I'm not usually awake in the afternoon. And who wants to waste time with checks? It was all very inconvenient, so I bought a pack on the spot. I get to my apartment and take the toquettes out of the envelope to examine them. Embossed on the back is the manufacturer. I research the manufacturer and find a distributor. I call the distributor to inquire about prices and availability. A box of 1,000 costs $58 plus $10 shipping, and they were in stock. Wowza. So I ordered 1 box and had it sent to my parents' house, lest the management office become suspicious. Now instead of $1 per wash and $1 per dry, each is costing me just 6.8 cents, and I have enough to last me years. Perfect. Fast forward to August. There are letters on everyone's door, notifying residents that the building is going condo, and that tenants had first dibs on purchasing their units, or the units would be sold and we'd be at the mercy of the new owners. What the actual frick? I'm gonna be honest with you, I wasn't even fully unpacked at this point. I never would have gone to the trouble of arranging for housing from across the country at this complex if I'd known I'd have to either purchase the apartment or risk my rent going way up. And that's why the rent was so low in the first place. They were trying to get as many occupants as they could, hoping we'd just buy our units, or the new owner of the unit would already have vetted tenants, making it attractive for prospective buyers. I was just ticked about having to move again. So, later that night, I put signs on everyone's door. Moving sale. Laundry tokens 50 cents each. Get 'em while you can. My phone started ringing at 7 AM. I made over $300 that day. I immediately ordered a few more boxes and put signs up in every building on the property the following week. My phone started blowing up even earlier that time. I moved out at the end of my lease, but the orders kept coming in. I divvy up each new box of tokens into little zip baggies in 10, 20, 25, 50, and 100 count increments. My customers' phone numbers were stored in my phone by building address and unit number. When they called, something like 4100-215 would show up in my caller ID. They'd tell me how many they needed. I'd deliver it to their door. I was like a drug dealer. I made several deliveries a week for a year. But then the machines were switched to coin-operated ones, and now they were calling for refunds. The management office was refunding residents full price for their unused tokens. So I instructed them to discard the little baggie they came in, take them back to the office, and they'll be given a full $1 for each one, netting them a profit of 50 cents each. In the end, I made about $3,000, which means I bilked the complex out of $6,000. I have no idea if the sharp decline in token sales was the impetus behind the switch. My favorite kind of TV shows are the kind where the hero is incredibly smart and they do something very clever in a way of defeating the antagonist. So this story is now one of my favorites. The fact that he moved in, he was like, man, they've got a really crappy system here. How can I get around this? Because here's the thing, everything is made somewhere. The hotel isn't going to be making those tokens, someone else is. If you keep that in mind, there are a lot of ways you can save a lot of money in this world. You just have to skip the middleman. This fan-submitted story was called Dad Treats Me Like Dirt All My Life. I Finally Get My Own. I recently moved out of my parents' home around 8 months back and into my own apartment just down the road from theirs, and it's been relieving. Some backstory. They both got their set of problems, but it is my dad in particular that is one of the worst people I have met in my life. He is that kind of person that is so bloody self-centered that he will never see any wrong in what he himself does and instead pins it on whoever he can. He is someone who's a pathological liar, and he will lie when it comes to just about anything if it's gonna end up benefiting him. This still rung true when I was younger, but only got extreme when I started getting into my teens and after an accident. My dad had a run-in with heart failure and was stuck in the hospital for a few weeks. When he came back home, we knew that he wouldn't be able to do what he had done before. He could no longer work, for example, and smaller tasks would be very hard on him. I have full understanding of this, and at first, he still did what he could, and we helped out some more. A few months in, however, he started improving, and what he would demand got oh so worse. I was around 13 when this happened, and I had a rough time in school. I was bullied, as many often are, and so I was, and still am, in a pretty bad headspace. Not only due to school, but due to other issues that my dad in particular would lay on at home. Not to sugarcoat it, he made my life a living and breathing hell on earth. Not gonna lie, I was lazy, as teens are, especially during that time. I had a rough time with cleaning my room. I didn't want to do chores, but if asked with a respectful tone, I would, albeit begrudgingly, do what I was asked. Until it started slowly. My mum would ask him to do a small task during the day when he was working, such as take out the trash or do the dishes. Nothing hugely exhausting, yet he just simply wouldn't do it when she came back home. This turned into him blaming things on me. I had come home earlier than my mum from school and claiming that he asked me to do the dishes, which he never did, to get out of trouble. My mum sadly believed him, and I would be put under hellfire. It continued. When he started to realize he could just get me to do everything for him instead, it got mad. Soon I'd get demands from him constantly. Do the dishes. Fine. I'll do them. Take out the laundry. Sure, fine. But then he got mean. Mean, demeaning, and ridiculous. What used to be somewhat reasonable requests became stupid. He started calling me out of my room just so that I could go across the house and fetch his phone for him, just because he didn't want to stand up. He'd get me to fetch him his glasses, a glass to drink out of, food, everything, as if I was a butler. And he didn't do it nicely now and then. He did it every single day, at least once an hour. Yet, I did it. At the start, I thought he was sick, but soon it became clear that he was overplaying his sickness. Whenever it was something that he wanted to do, i.e. go fetch a car or walk the dog, he walked the dog for 2 hours and refused to go fetch his phone 3 meters away. He'd be absolutely fine. No exhaustion, no nothing. And sure, you have your good days and bad days, but this was constant. And it wasn't just him asking me something. He was mean. He would call me names. He wouldn't say, "Could you please?" He would say, "Hey idiot, go do this." It was when I was 14 and a half that I started rebelling, just slightly. both due to the clear cause that no, he was not as sick as he was making himself out to be, but he was also refusing to do the most minute things for me. If he went to the kitchen to get a glass of water and I asked him to get a glass for me too, he would 99 out of 100 times say no. Even though it was literally just a single trip, I could ask him to reach me the TV remote if it laid in front of him on the table, and he'd say no and get me to stand up irregardless. It would have been him stretching a bit to hand it. These kinds of things that he simply refused to do, and I hated it. I absolutely loathed it, and his excuses became worse. Once claiming that he had a full-blown heart attack earlier in the day to get out of vacuuming the floors. Heck, once I was on freaking crutches due to a messed up spine, he made me go to the store at 10 PM to get him chocolate in a snowstorm. I wish I could make this up, but the rebelling wasn't a lot. It was me refusing to do certain things, or just make a scene and try and reason with him, which hardly discouraged him. So, finally, it reached a boiling point for me. I was tired of his stupid ways. I was tired of the excuses. I simply stopped caring. Up until that point, I was about 17 or 18 years old. I had been reasonable. Sure, I had been a bit of a less than nice person now and then, rebelling by muttering things under my breath, pretending I didn't hear him, but by then, I no longer gave a cent. The pure satisfaction I'd feel from saying such a simple 2-letter word to his face when he asked something was bliss. To see his face drop and fill with anger when he realized that his personal servant would no longer serve. I just said no. I said no to everything he demanded of me. It didn't matter what it was. Petty, darn right it was, but it was so satisfying to see his resolve crumble. "Go get me something to drink." "No," was what I said before I went back to my room. "I need you to go to the store." "Nope." "Get my phone." "Nup." It no longer mattered what he asked. I said no. If my mum asked something of me, I did it. She always asked me in a respectful manner, and she asked reasonable things of me. Did me saying no cause a tear in my family? Absolutely. Did I care? Not really. It was already bad. Eventually I moved out. As mentioned earlier in the story, and me living just down the road from my parents, conveniently close to the store, makes my dad think still that I can just drop everything and do errands for him. Only that now, I don't have to live with him. When I say no to things, it doesn't matter. I won't be given hell for it. But the most satisfying thing to this day that I do, he calls me. He wants me to do something. But all I do in turn is simply say, "No, I can't. I'm really, really sick." There will be people in your life who believe they have power over you, who believe they have authority over you. But often you'll discover, like the hero of this story did, that you have the power in that simple 2-letter word, no. And like we've explained before, it doesn't mean that you don't care for those who need it. It doesn't mean that you're not generous to others. Just like if you saw someone else being treated this way, and you'd want to stand up for that person, you need to stand up for yourself when you're that person. Sometimes you just need to say no. If you'd like your story to be narrated by me, don't forget to visit the subreddit r/VoiceyHere, link below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you'd like to see more. Alright, I'll see you in the next one.